You are 30 years old and you just got the title, Senior Manager. The email lands at 4:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and you read it 3 times before you let yourself believe it. Your base goes from $112,000 to $134,000. Bonus target moves from 15% to 20%. There's a stock grant, RSUs. $40,000 vesting over 4 years. You forward the email to your father, who replies, "Proud of you, son," in lowercase, from a phone he barely knows how to use. And that lowercase reply lands somewhere in your chest that surprises you. You go out that night. You order the second cheapest bottle on the list because the cheapest feels like flinching. You wake up Friday with a small headache and the sense that something has finally started. You don't yet understand that what started was a clock. The first year at the new title is a blur of competence. You manage a team of 7. You sit in rooms where decisions get made above you, and you watch how the people above you behave in those rooms. You learn that the people who get promoted are not the smartest in the room. They're the ones who make their boss's job easier in ways their boss can describe in a single sentence to their boss. You become that person. By 31, you are the name that comes up when there's a difficult cross-functional project that nobody wants to own. You own them. You deliver them. You eat the late nights without complaining, because complaining is what the people who don't get promoted do. Your salary at 32 is $158,000. Your savings rate is 11%, not because you can't afford more, but because lifestyle has filled the space the way water fills a glass. You moved into a 1-bedroom in a building with a doorman because the commute mattered, and the doorman was $400 a month of your life back. You bought a Peloton you ride 14 times in the first 6 months and twice in the next year. Each expense individually you can defend. The aggregate you don't run. You don't run the aggregate because running it would require asking a question you are not yet ready to ask. The first rule. At the corporate ladder's middle rungs, lifestyle creep is not a failure of discipline. It is the system functioning exactly as designed. The salary exists to make the salary necessary. You get promoted again at 33, director, base $172,000, bonus target 25%. You manage 3 managers now. You stop being someone who does the work and become someone who decides who does the work. You feel the change in your body. You sleep less well. Your girlfriend, a woman named Hannah who works in marketing, mentions twice in a month that you seem distracted on weekends. You apologize and try harder for about 9 days. Then a quarterly review cycle hits and you're back to scanning Slack at brunch. Your net worth at 33, after subtracting the car you barely drive, is approximately $229,000. By every external measure, you are doing extremely well. By every internal measure, you also feel like you're doing extremely well. There is no crack yet. The crack is 2 years away. At 34, your company gets acquired. The acquiring firm is a private equity-backed competitor twice your size. By Friday of the announcement week, your division has a new org chart. Your title survives. 3 of your peers' titles do not. You watch a man named Dario, who has been at the company for 11 years, who has 2 kids and a mortgage, and an unreasonable knowledge of the supply chain, get walked out at 2 p.m. with a cardboard box. You don't speak to him on his way out. Nobody does. It would be inappropriate. He emails the floor that night with a short, gracious message. You save the email. You don't write back for 6 weeks. Something has shifted. You go home that Friday and pour a drink and sit on your couch, and do not turn on the television. You think about the 11 years. You think about the fact that the company offered him 8 weeks of severance for those 11 years, which he took because the alternative was negotiating from no leverage with a wife and 2 kids watching. You think about your own 11-year mark, 7 years away. You think about the math of the 8 weeks, and you do not like the answer. The second rule: a salary is rented income. The lease can be terminated by the landlord on a Tuesday with no notice. You knew this abstractly at 22. You did not feel it in your body until you watched Dario carry the box. You start reading. Different books. Books about ownership versus employment. You learn the word carry. You learn what a management fee is. You learn that the partners at the firm that bought your company are paid in a structure taxed at roughly half your rate, on income roughly 15 times larger. You sit with that for a long time. You do not become bitter. Bitter is a cheap response to information. You become curious instead, which is a more expensive response because curiosity demands action. At 35, you raise your savings rate from 11% to 26% in one weekend. You move out of the doorman building. You use the second bedroom as an office because you have started doing something on weekends you have not yet told Hannah about. You are building something, a website that reviews enterprise software for a vertical you happen to know intimately because of your day job. You write the reviews on Saturday mornings. You publish on Sunday nights. The site makes $0 for 4 months, then $80 in month 5. By month 9, $1,200. You don't tell anyone at work. You tell Hannah eventually, on a Saturday night, when she asks why the office light has been on every weekend for a year. She listens. She says, okay, in a way that means she is reserving judgment, which is fair. The third rule: the salary buys your weekdays. What you do with your weekends decides whether you ever own anything. At 36, your director-level peer named Priya, a woman you would have bet on for VP, gets passed over. The slot goes to an external hire from a competitor. Priya finds out the way everyone finds out, in an org-wide email. She is professional about it. 6 weeks later, she is interviewing elsewhere. 4 months later, she is gone. The new VP is fine, not better than Priya, just external, which apparently mattered more than the 3 years of evidence the company already had. You watch this. You do not make a sound. But internally, something has finished settling. The corporate ladder is not a meritocracy. It is a meritocracy approximately 60% of the time, which is high enough to feel like one and low enough to ruin a career on the wrong Thursday. Your site at 36 makes $4,800 a month. You raise prices on the sponsorship slots. 2 advertisers churn. 3 new ones sign at the higher rate. You learn something that does not exist anywhere in your day job. When you own the thing, the upside accrues to you. When you work for the thing, the upside accrues to someone whose name is on a building you have never visited. At 37, you get promoted to VP. Base $215,000. Bonus target 35%. New stock grant $180,000 over 4 years. The promotion is real. You earned it. You are also less impressed by it than you would have been 4 years ago, because you now understand what the title is and what it isn't. The title is a leash with a longer chain. It is not ownership. The company will give you exactly as much rope as it needs to keep you from leaving, and not 1 inch more. The site at 37 makes $11,000 a month. You hire a part-time editor named Lucas, who lives in Lisbon and works for $2,200 a month, and is better at the job than you are. You realize you have crossed a line you did not know existed. You are now an employer, a small one, an accidental one, but a real one. The fourth rule: employees pay tax first and live on what's left. Owners live first and pay tax on what's left. This is a sentence you can read at 22. You cannot feel it until you have signed both sides of a paycheck. At 38, the acquiring firm announces a second restructuring. Your VP role is redefined. The redefinition is, in the language of the consulting deck, a lateral repositioning. In the language of your actual life, it is a demotion with the same title and a smaller scope. You are told this by a woman named Kestrel from the new HR org, who flew in from Dallas for the day, who you have never met, who is reading from a script. You go home that night. Hannah is making pasta. You sit at the kitchen counter and tell her what happened. She listens. Then she asks the question that has been sitting between you for 2 years, that neither of you has wanted to ask. She says, "What does the site make now?" You tell her, $19,000 a month. Profit, not revenue. After Lucas, after hosting, after the part-time bookkeeper. She says, "And the day job?" You say, $215 base, maybe $300 all in if the bonus lands. She does the math out loud. The site, growing 40% year over year, throws off more cash than your job after taxes, once you account for the difference in tax treatment between W-2 income and pass-through business income. She says, "Why are you still going to the office?" You don't have an answer. You have several non-answers. Health insurance, stability, the vesting schedule, the identity, the story you tell people at parties, the story your father can repeat to his friends, the cardboard box that walked Dario out at 2 p.m., and the certainty that the box can never come for someone with a real title at a real company. Except that you have now watched the box come for several such people, and the certainty has degraded into a hope. Hannah doesn't push. She finishes the pasta. You eat in silence. It is not hostile. It is the silence of two people watching a frame change in real time. At 39, you give notice. You schedule a meeting with your manager. You say the sentence cleanly. Your manager, a decent person named Adele, is genuinely surprised. She asks if it's about money. You say no. She asks what you're going to do, and you tell her. And she pauses, and she says, "I didn't know you were doing that." And you say, "Nobody did." And she nods slowly, in a way that suggests she understands more than she's going to say. You leave on a Friday, a small farewell, a card, a bottle of wine you will not drink. You go home. You do not work that weekend. You feel, for the first time in almost a decade, like the time is yours. The fifth rule: the corporate ladder is a building somebody else owns. You can climb it for 30 years and still wake up renting. At 40, your net worth is $740,000. The site does $31,000 a month. You have hired 2 more people. You have started a second site in an adjacent vertical. You have not bought a more expensive apartment. Hannah is your wife now. You think about the version of you who got the email at 4:47 on a Thursday at 30. The version who ordered the second cheapest bottle. The version who forwarded the email to his father. You don't want to shame him. He did what he was supposed to do. He climbed. He delivered. He performed competence in rooms full of people performing competence at each other. He earned every promotion. He was, by every measure available to him at the time, winning. He just didn't know what game he was playing. He didn't know the game had 2 boards. He didn't know the visible board, the one with the titles and bonuses and org charts, was the board where you compete for a salary somebody else has already capped. And the invisible board, the one nobody at his company would ever describe to him because nobody at his company was on it either, was the board where you build something whose ceiling is not set by anybody. He spent his 30s on the visible board. He won. The win cost him a decade. Somewhere in this city right now, there is a 30-year-old reading an email that says senior manager. The base is $134,000. The bonus is 20%. There is a stock grant. He is forwarding the email to his father. He thinks this is the beginning of something. He is right. He just doesn't know what. The clock started when the email landed. It always does. It always will.